Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world. It's Ilkka here from Sonatype. Joining me, Brian Fox, co-founder and CTO at Sonatype, and we are here to give you a brief sort of discussion about what's been going on with the XZ package and the software supply chain attack that was pretty interesting. That was targeted against it and uncovered a couple of weeks ago, and some of the interesting sort of developments that have happened since. So, Brian, nice to see you. I see that you're
Yep.
traveling,
Yep.
and it seems like quite a lot has happened. So, why don't we just start off with talking about you know brief summary of XZs. What kind of was driving that attack, and then let's talk a little bit about what's been uncovered since.
Yeah. So the XZ library, it's a compression library that is deep in the stack of many things, including Linux, which is what makes it this attack potentially have been so dangerous. So this is a case where somebody all the way back in late 2021 initiated sort of a social pressure campaign using a handful of sock puppet email accounts to try to generate fake outrage about the fact that the single maintainer of this project wasn't acting upon fixes fast enough, and then introduced this new person who ultimately started helping and contributing and becoming a maintainer on the project. Now, this happened all the way back in 2021. More recently, they added a specific malware code. In fact, it's a little bit more complex than that. All the way back, I forget the exact date, but a long time ago, they added what I think would best be described as parsing code to a build file. So the seed of the attack was planted a long time ago, and only recently did they drop the actual malicious payload, which was processed by that seed parser code with the intent of creating a backdoor. Basically, they created a master key. Anything signed with a certain thing would be allowed access to the system. And also, I believe I read that the key itself could contain code to execute. So it wasn't just I have a master lock to get in and poke around. It was potentially I could send an encrypted message to any of these systems. Now, if you think about that, all systems basically run Linux these days, whether it's embedded or machines, virtual machines, containers. So the scope of this could have been huge. Fortunately, it was discovered and unwound, but the implications really are that we are dealing with a very sophisticated set of actors who are working over a very long time, up to no good, right? So that's sort of the synopsis of the XZ attack, and it sort of has a lot of folks in the open source community kind of sitting up and paying attention, because it really calls into question, how can you trust? How do you trust anyone these days when you can look for activity and behaviors, but you have to look across many years? And I've seen myself the IRC logs of the entire project going back to when this whole thing went down, and there were some interesting takeaways, but most of it was there was a lot of work these people were doing that weren't directly involved in the payload, right? These were not trivial changes. They were working to improve the efficiency of the compression algorithm. My hypothesis is they were trying to create headroom so they could add more code over the top and not have anybody notice the performance hit. But as you can imagine, improving efficiency of a compression algorithm is not something you do as a drive-by. And there was a lot of work, a lot of engagement sustained over those 2 years.
Yeah, I think what's really remarkable about this is, the evidence points out to a well-resourced attacker or adversary in this. Like as you said, they engaged for several years, and it was from what I understand pretty intense as well at times. Like they kept working pretty much in line with the original maintainer. And over a period of time, I mean, a lot of the contributions they did were pretty much by the book, as you would expect. In hindsight, when you look at the sort of development from a random contributor to them becoming a co-maintainer, and then obviously doing all of this, it seems fairly accelerated. But within the context what's particularly devious about this is that it passed any sniff test. Any one of us could have looked at that project and gone, yeah, it seems like everything is in order. We found someone to help out with this. So
Yeah,
so
it definitely is. But with the, the benefit of hindsight, going back and reading all of that, it's pretty clear that this isn't a case of somebody who was a legitimate actor whose account got compromised. Like, that's not the case. You can see the planting of seeds a long time ago. There was even a specific push to get the release in by the end of the year, but they were talking about that almost a year ago. So they had sort of a roadmap, if you will, laid out in a release delivery timeline that they were trying to manage the project to, far before all of this was happening. So, you can see it now looking back, but yeah, in the moment you wouldn't have been able to pick it up.
yeah, and that's the truly remarkable case of this as well, is as they were doing this, either it could be a sock puppet persona that actually had a lot of people. It feels like it's a fairly consistent engagement. Um, but they were also at the same time advocating for all of these Linux distros, obviously, to adopt this piece of this compression algorithm as a part of their sort of standard package. And this is ultimately how it was discovered, because it was in some of those early Fedora unstables, and I think a couple of Debian unstables as well.
Yeah, in a ironic kind of twist, I think there might have been a bug in their code. And so there was a mad scramble at the end, I've seen in the emails, trying to get the distro maintainers to pick up the 5.6.1 patch even after their package freeze was in place. There was sort of that mad scramble, and I think anybody who's written software would recognize that, that last minute, 11th hour bug that, oh no, we just have to make this fix before the ship. And so it was somewhat interesting to see even the normal things play out on this side. But when I saw this go down, my thoughts immediately went to, wait a minute, if they did this and started this 2 years ago, there's no way they've just been sitting and doing nothing, waiting for an opportune time to take over or to put something negative in the project. What else would they do? Logic would dictate that they wouldn't stop at one project. They'd go find their way into more projects. And so that's been my fear all along. Unfortunately, as was announced on Monday, the OpenJS and OpenSSF put out a press release talking about another similar pattern to this. Now, I've seen the details on this one. That the project hasn't been announced yet because the investigation is still ongoing, but the pattern of the multiple sock puppet accounts, pretending to be different people, all claiming that this project is dead and needs assistance, is unmistakable. Unfortunate for them, they made some mistakes in the emails, which makes it crystal clear when you see them that this is not just a random occurrence, that we're not seeing boogeyman. There's definitely something going on, and this just kind of confirmed that initial suspicion I had, that there are more of these out there that we need to be looking for. And so that, I think, is the more interesting and concerning sea change that we're sitting at right now.
Yeah, it really is quite obvious when you look at some of these projects that it kind of follows a very sort of standardized pattern, right? These high sort of adoption, low levels of maintainer type of projects. Projects start getting sort of external pressure, like the mailing lists fill out. Hey, why aren't we seeing more releases? That sort of thing. And as the pressure ramps up, it's kind of human nature to go, well, I can only get so many things done. It's open source, and part of the philosophy of open source is, everyone's welcome to pick up a shovel, right? Yeah. So that's really how these plays seem to be going. Is they're subverting this sort of very basic tenet of how to get involved in a project, and really using that sort of social pressure to apply on the maintainers. So for years, we've been hearing about this sort of ungrateful community trope from open source maintainers, right? Community just wants and doesn't contribute back. So in that sort of sense, what makes this really sort of devious, this type of approach, is clearly calculated to add the pressure on the maintainer, and then then they use that sort of steam valve to really come out as a savior and start helping out, and that's obviously when they would then flick the mode of the operations to that other part. Um, and it's pretty chilling to think, chilling and kind of at the same time, as you said, pretty obvious that's happening elsewhere. Is now that we have credible evidence that's happening. That I think we're going to see a lot more scrutiny in the last few years, looking at the last few years on projects that kind of fit that sort of profile, to see how widespread this activity is. But it's pretty clear that this sort of stuff is very professional,
Yeah.
at least in these few cases.
Yeah, it's unmistakable. And so, I think the advice is really, the same advice we always have. You need to understand what your dependencies are, where they're coming from. You need to be on the watch out for, single maintainer projects, because those are the ones that seem to be targeted right now. Foundations would tend to have more practices in place to triage that. And that's exactly what we saw in this OpenJS case. Because the bad guys, if you will, they had to convince a bunch of people, not just one person who was burned out and looking for a savior. And so, as you assess your dependencies, these are the kinds of things that you need to be looking out for. The open source community needs to be looking back to see if maybe this has happened in years past, and try to uncover those. And so there's a number of us in the industry that are having conversations about this to try to figure out, how can we do this? How can we help the maintainers uncover it? If they think they've found an incident, who do they tell? What do they do? So I'm here at the Software Security Summit, the LF Open Source Security Summit in Seattle, and that's been a number of conversations. So there are some things that are coming to help on the open source side, but the consumer side is still the same. Using fewer, better, healthier projects will reduce the surface area of this, and having the understanding of your dependencies will of course allow you to immediately respond and triage. If you don't know what your dependencies are, you don't even know if you're affected. And this is what we've been saying for decades effectively.
Yeah, I think that's a really important statement to make, and just to kind of draw a line under it. Ultimately, the target of all of these types of attacks is the consumer of that project, not really the maintainers or the distros that are used as a vehicle. That's kind of a basic tenet of software supply chain. The mindset I think that everybody needs to adopt, right, is any project at any given time might have any one of these state changes. That turns out maybe they were compromised. Turns out maybe they just have a vulnerability. The risk is 100% realized on the consumer side. That's really where the backdoor affects you, and that's really where they're going to be looking for adoption as well. So it's really, really important to develop that capability of understanding where your dependencies are, and as you rightly say, develop some level of quality control of what are you bringing in. These are sort of the basic tenets that we've been talking to our customers about many years, right? Fewer, better suppliers, introducing standards on what those suppliers should be, and one of those elements is indeed maintenance status, what sort of backing ecosystem it has, and it's certainly something that you see. It's clearly not just limited to Java. OpenJS is obviously a JavaScript foundation, so it's clearly clearly a pattern that they're probably looking at all of these different open source ecosystems that you see. So the community is coming together to come up with sort of things to defend on the upstream, but I think the real urgent call to action is actually on the downstream to do all of this, right? Be on the lookout. These incidents happen all the time, and it's pretty clear that more of them are going to be uncovered. So you're going to have to sort of mentally prepare the capability to be able to address it as quick as it can be as it comes out.
Yeah. And as concerned as I am about all the other not uncovered incidents that I'm certain are out there, whenever these things happen, there's always a flood of copycats too. So if nothing else, we're going to see a bunch of these attempts on projects in the near future, which is just going to muddy the waters as it always does. But this is the reality we live in. This is a new tool in the bag of the threat actors, and it won't go away. It's just like the dependency confusion. As soon as that was disclosed a few years ago, Within the weeks following, we saw a 7,000% explosion in the number of components we were tracking that had those similar patterns. And it remains a durable attack vector even today. So I think that's the reality here, that you need to be prepared for these types of things. You need to be on the lookout for malicious components of all types, and this is something that we've been building solutions for a long time. Firewall with the next gen malware detection is a great way to be able to detect and block these things before they get on the development systems.
Yeah, amen to that. And just to kind of give everybody a sense of just the general volume of malicious packages, I think we just discovered like something like 15,000 packages trying to data mine a reward system. So
in 1 week, yeah.
yeah, exactly. So unfortunately, the volume keeps increasing, and yeah, there's unfortunately that's the reality that we live in. Well, that's some joyful thoughts to end this brief update on. Brian, really glad to see that you're out there talking to the open source community, coming up with these things that we can do to help our maintainers. And on the consumer side, obviously, we will continue to look out for these, and as and when they are uncovered, our customers of Firewall and Lifecycle will get our intelligence as soon as we have it. But for now, we'll leave it here and get back to the business of protecting the supply chain.
Bye, everyone.